Hello and welcome to the Sports Box, and we have a very special episode today. Last season we didn't cover a lot of FPL, and I know that there are a lot of FPL enthusiasts around, on our YouTube channel, and we would want to dedicate, a series specially to that. And considering the fact that we're going to have our first game week in a couple of weeks, and we ourselves, personally, I and Sudhir are really, really excited about it, and we just wanted to share our first teams and our first drafts, although this is subject to a lot of changes considering that the transfer window is still active and a lot of clubs are looking for a lot of players, so it could all change. But I don't think the teams will change too much because 90% of the managers sort of prefer to not start new transfers in the first week. They probably get them off the bench, and plus, we don't really want to take a risk on players who haven't been integrated with the squad and are new to the league, unless they are Lionel Messi or someone like that. So we would be very open if you guys ask us questions. That's why we're doing a live instead of a pre-recorded video, because we don't claim to be experts, but we would definitely try our best, to the best of our knowledge, to sort out your queries. So, Sudhir, first of all, we'll just start with your team. I think you've picked out a lot of Spurs player, being an Arsenal fan. A lot of Arsenal I can see in your, I can see a maxed out Arsenal lineup. Obviously, because you're an Arsenal fan, and obviously the biggest trick here is that Manchester United and Man City are not going to play in the first game week. So we'll have to figure out. I personally think that a lot of teams are going to play an early wildcard in game week 2 if they want to, or maybe in game week 3 if at all City or United have a very good first game. So watch out for that as well. But as of now, we're just going to look at a first draft, and we're going to discuss all the players that sort of were in our shortlist but couldn't make our respective teams. And we're going to discuss a lot of other options as well, and a few options who could be better off after a couple of game weeks, which we would want to have on our shortlist. So, Sudhir, let's start from the back, because generally the goalkeeper is one of the most stable fixtures in the FPL team, because you buy a goalkeeper and you don't want to waste transfer on him. So take me through your thought process. Obviously, you are Martinez. So how did you which were the players that you did shortlist, and why did he make the cut?
So thank you, Prithvi, once again for hosting me on the Sports Box. This is obviously a really fantastic episode because we've both done a lot of groundwork, and in spite of all that, because this is FPL, essentially, there's just so much fun in chopping and changing, and realizing somewhere in the middle that something's gone wrong, and you have to rework your entire strategy. And the this year, I think the entire format of the game is very different because obviously there is a huge debate about how they've changed positions for a lot of players. So that was one of the first things that hit me. Like for example, someone like Obama Yang, who's been a forward all throughout, and he's been great value, and he's been near, the golden boot charts or the top forward charts. Now he's suddenly been pushed to a midfielder. So while the goals may get a lot of points, if you go just a step below, his bonus points may take a hit. He may get a point for a clean sheet, but then so there are a lot of these very odd factors which are frankly new. Obviously, I never. I mean, yeah, my fantasy history is not the best, so I mean, that's another thing. But that being said, they've also made a lot of very clear choices this year. For example, this is very strange thing that FPL has done where Salah and Mane are both 12, but Salah
Correct.
has penalties. So now I think what they've done is they've essentially priced out Mane, unless Mane suddenly decides to, like I'm now going to put myself in the shop window for maybe a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or a Madrid for next season, and then he just goes goal crazy because I don't think Salah and Mane combined have a lot of assist numbers in their, I mean, they're not really great when it comes to the assist stats, single digits throughout the season. But yes, goals obviously 50 plus, I guess, over the past 2 seasons consistently. So that's a huge thing. Uh,
So let's
Aguero,
start with the goalkeeper,
yeah,
Sudhir.
sorry.
Yeah.
So let me just run through. So essentially now we have only a couple of premium goalkeepers like Ederson, and he's just too expensive. Of course, he's the only person who's probably sure of having his spot in the Pep Guardiola team. Everybody else is available for chopping and changing. No, the infamous Pep Rule has no mercy. But yes, obviously, this year what I've gone for, and I've heard a lot of other managers also go for, is a lot of. I mean, they'll just keep two 4.5 keepers who are starters, and then just set and rotate amongst them. So obviously, the options among those 4.5 keepers was Martinez, then you have Ryan, and then you have McCarthy. So these three teams have fairly, decent defensive records. Arsenal are looking like they're improving defensively. So in 38 league 38 game league season, hopefully we'll have at least 12 to 13 clean sheets, not just for fantasy but obviously for our league ambitions as well. And we have a fairly stable defense now, a couple of additions here. So I think 4.5 keepers set and forget is the strategy I'm going to go for. The only temptation was probably Pope from Burnley, but I think he's been priced at 5.5 this year, and
Right.
it's that weird price where it's accurate. 5.5 for Pope for what he did last year is very accurate, but it just sort of slightly prices him out of most teams because there are other spots where you can invest your money in, and maybe getting a Burnley defender is good enough to start off with. And also, again, the fact that United and City don't have games in the first game week, but also Burnley misses out. So again, that's another component which needs. So Burnley don't have a game in the first game week. So getting a Burnley asset, uh, unless it's just 4.5 fodder, seems a waste. So I think yeah, Martinez and McCarthy is the way to go for me this season. That's it. Just set and
So,
forget those two
my
4.5 keepers.
yeah,
That's all.
I get where you're coming from, and I know there are a lot of things that need to be changed. But I personally think that rotation in terms of goalkeepers can be very tricky because a lot of time what happens is that you pick one goalkeeper, the other one keeps a clean sheet. You pick the other one. So my strategy is irrespective of the price of the keeper, I want to pick a keeper who's 100% going to start. So you spoke about someone like a Pope and Edison, or there are a lot of lesser teams who are solid defensively and have only one first choice for a keeper.
Correct.
Now, what my problem with Martinez is the fact that obviously he's been tremendous, but considering that you have Leno, who's the backup option now, which was the other way
Correct.
around last season, I think that is one of the toughest competition for goalkeepers because they are very close in terms of their level. Obviously, in terms of form, Martinez is the one who's going to be selected, but he makes a couple of errors here and there, and I can see a Leno coming in and then having to waste another transfer on that. So I what I like is that you also have McCarthy in your team, so that in
Correct.
case his first team spot is taken away from him due to a couple of howlers, you'll have a McCarthy who can at least save you the cost of an additional transfer because we all know how precious transfers are
Correct.
in FPL. So I really like what you've done there, and Martinez is someone which not a lot of teams are picking because again Arsenal
Arsenal
is a
don't really
risk.
have a. So I
Yeah,
think one small caveat that I can probably provide because I'm an Arsenal fan, obviously it's just good overall knowledge is that Martinez has been the cup keeper and we've had two cup wins, one against Liverpool, I think yesterday, the Community Shield, and also one against Chelsea a month ago in the FA
yeah.
Cup final. I'm not sure whether you saw that game or not, but
Hmm.
no. So the
I'm not
idea is
sure whether Anthony Taylor saw that game, but yeah, it was a good game.
no.
But yeah,
So I think what has happened is uh, yes, the Martinez Leno saga is brilliant, but Martinez has not put a foot wrong in every opportunity that is been provided to him. Two cup finals again. You may or may not consider yesterday's game to be a cup final, but two cup competitions. He's won. He's done great. He's performed really well in both of them. So he's not done something wrong, which means Arteta doesn't have any reason to drop Martinez. And Arteta seems like this. And also, there's talks of a new deal being offered to Martinez, an extension. also being offered and a higher salary being given. So all these points that he is going to be the starting keeper come the first game week, unless he gets sold, which is a dramatic thing which may happen. Otherwise, I think his spot is confirmed.
Yeah,
So
because
yeah,
I've been hearing a lot of rumors with about a Martinez sale for about 20 million, which is obviously pretty exciting since that's the only position that Chelsea haven't strengthened this season. So I think that if at all he's transfer listed or the rumors are true, you never know what's happening. Because on one end you're saying that they're offering him a new deal. So is it like a case where they want to offer him a larger, longer
so
contract
I
so that
think
they can
so.
get a
I'm
better transfer?
assuming what has happened is we know for a fact that Martinez is attracting interest from clubs. That's point number one. He's been on a very low wage
Pay scale.
relatively for footballers, 25K per week or 20K per week for the past few years, and he has 2 more years left on his contract. So that's the idea, to sort of reward his patience and his performance over the past few months by offering him a good deal. Also, I'm guessing the simplest logic is you offer him a good deal, and in January or next summer, you sort of sell him. Now,
Correct.
I mean, if Chelsea come in to buy him, which seems very, very, very unlikely, I'm very sure it's going to be a huge premium. 20 seems fair, but then we want to get more money. But I think his spot again, when it comes again, we keep deviating from FPL to EPL, but when it comes to fantasy, I think unless something goes horrendously wrong and Arteta sort of does something which is very out of nature, Martinez seems to be set as the primary choice goalkeeper at Arsenal. So that's why I've sort of gone for him. And
Fair enough.
worst case scenario, if something goes wrong, we have McCarthy, who's from Southampton, who's a fairly decent team defensively. They're sound. They're not fantastic, but they have their grooves of good form. So yeah, I think
Correct.
that's the idea that I've gone with. Two 4.5 starters. Just just yes. Then don't bother and keep rotating between the two of them without having to waste a transfer unless
Correct.
something goes horribly wrong.
Now
So
let's
yeah,
move on to the defense. We've talked a little too much about the goalkeeper, but one question that we have from Puneet, who's my co-host on the channel, is why Robertson over Trent Alexander-Arnold? I'm pretty sure it's just that additional point 0.5, and you must have seen that the points difference between them was, I think, 20 odd points last season, which is
correct.
not too much.
So,
And obviously, fitting other players would have been a major reason why you picked him. But just take me through the picking
uh,
Robertson over Dow.
So I think one important thing is which we sort of do in FPL is the eye test. Is you see these players playing and then you're like, huh, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. So obviously there is no difference at all when it comes to. I mean, there is visibly a lot of difference when it comes to Alexander Arnold and Robertson when they're playing in a game. Over the past 2 seasons, I think a year ago, it was Robertson who was the highest scoring defender in FPL. I think last year it was Alexander Arnold.
Correct.
So, I mean, again, over 2 years, it sort of balances out. Again, just going by history, I saw Robertson play yesterday in the Community Shield, and
Mhm.
he was definitely probably the best Liverpool player. Uh, in my opinion, again, that's just a small observation I made. And he was whipping in a lot of crosses. He was trying to, I mean, he almost scored, and he's tried to score in the past. And then I think, yeah, the fact that the difference between him and Ta is only point 0.5 comes in handy because you have money to spend in other areas. The difference is only 20 odd points through the end of the season. I think that's a gamble which can be probably, hopefully, pay off. And
Mhm.
again, the difference of zero point 0.5 is very minimal. So worst case, I realize Ta is suddenly on course for a Ballon d'Or. I can just quickly swap them out without much collateral damage.
Fair
But yes,
enough.
the point 0.5 which I'm saving right now, I'm guessing that could come in handy in other areas. So that's the idea why I went for Robertson over time. And
And
also because I liked what I saw of Robertson when I played yesterday. So they're both at a very high level of functioning. But for me, I think Robertson just sort of eked it out because of the point 0.5 which I saved. And yeah, that's
no,
about it.
because I've seen Liverpool in the last couple of games. I saw their friendly against Salzburg as well. Obviously, you don't read too much into friendlies because they can
True,
be of
true, true,
course.
true.
But this time it's going to be a little different. Apart, I would not give too much weightage to the first friendly game because that is mostly about fitness. But I think the game
True.
against Salzburg, it was a second game. And obviously not to give it undue importance, but I think that Liverpool defensively aren't going to be as solid as they were in the past couple of seasons, and I can see that hangover from the
Last season.
post-lockdown period because Liverpool probably didn't play too well yesterday. I mean, by their standards, they had chances and all that, but they never looked clinical. I think the only good game they played post lockdown was the 5-3 game against Chelsea, wherein they scored worldlies after worldlies with Keita and Trent Alexander-Arnold. But if you look at their entire set of performances, irrespective of the scores, they haven't been very convincing. So I'm not very sure. Obviously, they're good at getting results, so they can
So
get
I,
over
I,
the line.
I so what I thought was obviously by the restart you knew where the title was going to go, and
Correct.
if they did, go off the boil towards the end, they still won the league with 7 games to go. Which again, these are all huge numbers. So if they sort of switched off a bit defensively, offensively, I won't even blame them because it was in the bag. Uh, Again, that being said, I think. You look at a Klopp and you think this guy is going to make these people set these people straight when the new season comes by. So I think defensively they may not get all the same number of 12, 13 clean sheets which they got last season. Oh, no, was it close to 16? But yes, they're definitely going to get a lot, definitely more than 10 because you can sort of see that sort of philosophy being implemented. And
No,
also
he's
that being
playing
said,
a very high line as well, which is a little concerning
true.
for me because in the last season he did play slightly a slightly higher line, but this time he's going a little too much. He's trying to go into
But
that
then
bind.
offensively, that sort of helps us because you have these fullbacks who will be contributing in attack. So, I mean, that's the idea. Because we're not buying a Gomez who's actually fantastic value if you want clean sheets. Because Gomez costs 5.5 million in FPL. So he's like the sound defensive asset that you want from Liverpool if you want one. But whereas Star and Alexander Robertson are offensive, essentially offensive assets. They give more than 180, almost 170 points every season. So they're probably better than most midfielders in the game. So not having them is probably a very, very bad idea unless something goes spectacularly bad for Liverpool. So that's like a huge deal. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the
Even if
idea.
it goes bad, Sudhir, I personally think that Robertson and Ta are going to get their attacking returns at least.
Exactly.
And still, I look at it this way that if I'm going to buy a Ta, is a Trent Alexander Arnold, so am I going to find another asset at 7.5 who's going to give me the same returns, irrespective
Correct.
of which position he plays in? Do I have a mid
Exactly. Exactly. So the
another
bonuses that you get because of the clean sheets and the BPS because they're a defender, obviously they play in and make a huge factor. So having
yeah,
one of Ta, I think Ta already has like a 58% ownership in FPL at this moment, as of a
right.
few minutes ago. So
Yeah,
I'm guessing having one of them is probably mandatory.
yeah.
But which one? The only maybe again, I'm trying to be cheeky. It could backfire horrendously, or I may look really smart at the end of this gamble. But saving that point 0.5 and using it in another direction makes some sense to me. So that's why Robertson from the
Yeah,
Liverpool team.
you at the end of it, even if you lose 20 points, it's not too much
Exactly.
over the course of a season. That averages almost half a point a game week, which is manageable. It's not going
Correct.
to make or break your season. And if at all, and either ways, even that point 0.5 is not going to change your team drastically. So
True.
it's like a calculated risk that you're taking. It's not, you don't lose either ways. So
True.
next we go to Digne. Digne, I think, is a terrific FPL asset. He was not as prolific as he was in the previous season. Last season, Everton was struggling in general as a team, and Carlo Ancelotti is strengthening the midfield because I think that
Exactly.
they have an okay forward line, they have a decent defensive line, but they struggle defensively, and I think they have one of the they have like top half defenses and a defense and an attack, but they have a relegation level midfield when it comes to the unit as
True.
a whole. and
True.
buying Alan, and I've also heard they're in for a lot of other players. So they're looking at
James
strengthening
Rodriguez, apparently. That
James
now,
Rodriguez, yes, and
so we'll have to clear another slot from the midfield to accommodate that guy because I'm very sure he'll be given free kicks and penalties and he'll be taking shots from 30 yards out. But yes, I think Dean is Dean is probably my sort of differential pick. I'm very sure what is going to happen this year is, as it usually happens, there's going to be a template and everybody's going to stick to it. This year, I'm assuming because everybody's going to invest in midfield and forwards, it's going to be one of Ty and Robertson and then 4.5 defenders all throughout. So I again maybe this pays off, maybe it doesn't.
yeah,
Everton
I
have a lot
think
of great fixtures at home. A lot of fixtures from teams which are ranked lower than them, and Dean has always been a fairly attacking defender. So he's
right.
provided goals and assists in the past. I am just hoping the difference sort of pays off for me. And in a couple of weeks, if he doesn't, he's a fairly high asset. I can drop him off, get a 4.5, get the money, invest it in a midfield. And yeah, that's the idea. So Dean for the first 5 or 6 game weeks because they seem to have a favorable fixture list, and then we
Mhm.
can see. So that's my approach for him.
Correct. And Kyle Walker-Peters, obviously, to make up the
Correct.
numbers, and the fact that he's pretty attacking. I mean, I've seen him
Correct.
play. Southampton are a good unit. They finally found some stability under Hassan Attal after
Correct.
struggling the most part of the last season. They had a very good end to the season, and they even
True.
struggled the year before. So I think they have something stable right now, and I think that would help them. Help having a Southampton asset even in defense, and they're not defensively very open. Obviously, they
Correct.
play a very high pressing game, but they're not a team under Hassan Attal apart from the 9-0 against Leicester, where they were really poor. But they've done very well against a big team. So I think that's I won't.
So I
I
think apart from Hassan Huttle, apart from Kyle Walker Peters, I also have Vinagre in my team. So again, now Vinagre, Kyle Walker Peters, these players are very famous. My other defender is Taylor from Burnley. So now Vinagre, I think Vinagre is like the Lundstrom this year because everybody's heard about him. Everybody knows he starts and he's in everyone's teams. Of course,
Yeah.
Lundstrom gave a lot of attacking return. That may or may not happen with Nagre, but everyone knows it. You may or may not have seen him play, but I'm sure his ownership is fantastic at this point of time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because with
he's just
Johnny
one of those
losing,
players.
I think since
Yeah,
Johnny got injured, even I have him in my team to
exactly,
be honest. So I
exactly,
know he's a safe buy at 4.5. It's not
exactly,
like the greatest
exactly.
decision of all time, and it's not like
True.
a bad one. So I think
Just
it's
bench
a
fodder at this point in time. People who are starting, people who may give returns, people who who may not really harm you if you are or aren't in your team, and it doesn't go lower than that. So that it's the same for Vinagre and for Taylor. Taylor is
Taylor.
also a fairly decent Burnley defender. Few attacking returns in the past season. So him, Kyle Walker, Peters, Vinagre, I think the three can just be rotated amongst themselves and. They sort of pick themselves not just for their ownership numbers but also their general track record. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
idea.
So now, obviously, we're going to come to the interesting part. We're going to come to the midfield and the attack. Let's start with midfield because I know that a lot of people are going to invest. I mean, you have still gone top heavy. If you actually look at it, you have two premium forwards, which I think makes sense considering that for the first time, I don't think there's a forward with more than 10.5 million this season, which is
Yep,
like good
Aguero.
value. Yeah, and Aguero at 10.5, people all forget about him because he gets injured and they think, his time is over, and then he comes in with a hat trick and
Four
you're
goals
looking
against
to
Newcastle,
get
and then
him
you're
back,
like, I didn't even have him in my team. I'm like,
get
yeah,
him back in your team, and then he gets injured again. So his injuries have been a big concern, but I do think that he's still a top FPL pick when fit, and I think he's got the best goals per minute ratio. So if
exactly.
at all he has 15 games back to back, I would back him to outscore almost everyone in the league, including the Salahs, Aubameyang, anyone, because that's the kind of player he is. So obviously, we're not looking at him in the initial phase of the season, but surely there'll be a point where he'll play a very important part. So let's just start with one of the most staple midfielders in most teams, considering especially the first two fixtures. That's Aubameyang, and obviously it is you've picked him as a captain. And against West Ham, West Ham have been pretty poor, although they did do a little better towards the end of the season, but overall they haven't been very impressive. And if they lose Declan Rice to Chelsea, they could be, he's probably been their best player last season, and if they lose him, I don't know, they'll be in the big. I can see them in a lot of big trouble.
So I think the thing
There's a
with West
question
Ham is
before
they
you
always have this.
question. Sidon asked that why are there no Sterling and KDB in your team? That's because Man City are not involved in the first game week, so he has decided not to just pick, because there's too much value to just leave them on the bench for an 11.5, 11 million. So he's decided not to go for them in
And
the
the
first
same goes
week.
for United assets as well.
Correct, correct. Fair enough. So now we'll start with Aubameyang. I mean, we won't waste much time on him because he's one of the most obvious picks. But obviously, you're an Arsenal fan. You've seen him play, and he's had a very good finish to the end of the last season. And what about Salah? Obviously, it's a difficult thing. Why did you pick Aubameyang over Salah? Because that is the question that I want to ask you.
So I think what I've done is again you either go with statistics or you go with history or you go with the eye test. In my case, the eye test for Obama is just like a 10 out of 10. There's just no doubts about that. Hopefully, he scores 3 goals against West Ham in the London derby, then takes off his jersey and says, "Yes, I've signed a contract." And I'm hoping if they don't announce it before they do it by then. But jokes aside, I think uh, usually we scored a lot of goals against West Ham, so that's a good thing. Hopefully, it keeps on scoring. And yeah, Salah again. I think he could be a bit rusty. I think he's just tired. Maybe a couple of game weeks later, if Salah picks up form, which I'm sure he will, I think I'll just trade off Salah and Aubameyang with each other. So I think that sort of goes
Hi,
with each
Sudhir, are
other.
you
So
there?
that's my
So to
yep.
answer your question, Simon, I think that a lot of teams are considering Salah because obviously he's been one of the top. He's been the top scorer in the
Absolutely.
last two seasons before this, and I think second in the last season. But we're looking at the form in pre-season as well, because obviously Salah is generally a player who starts off very well, and I
True.
personally had him in my team in my draft for a very long time. But right now, if I actually look at him, I am a little concerned. So you don't want to spend 12 million on a player who starts off very well, and I'm so sorry, there was a technical glitch and I had to sort of sign out. And I'll just share the screen again. Yeah, this is it. So yeah, coming back to Salah, I was yeah. Why did you pick Aubameyang over Salah? And obviously, you were answering that question. Can you hear me now, Sudhi? Hello. So I think we've lost Sudhir. There's some issues. Sudhir, if as soon as you start hearing me, you can uh, give me a shout out. And so let me just continue with the stream, and I'm going to take you through my team. And obviously, my team is a little different from his. I'll just get it on screen right now. So even I had a lot of apprehensions regarding the goalkeeper, because I actually had Nick Pope in my first draft, and it was pretty interesting for me to decide which one to pick. Because obviously Nick Pope is one of the. So I'll just enlarge this. So I went for Ramsdale because obviously I was looking at a lot of budget options and I don't want to go in. Obviously, the vice captain is not something that I'm looking to do. It's just a rough draft. But when I look at Ramsdale, I think that he's a player who's going to play in a very conservative Sheffield lineup, and they're not going to be very attacking, but they're going to keep a lot of clean sheets, and he's going to make a lot of saves. And they've spent, it's a record signing, so I think that obviously he's going to start each and every game. So he, for me, is a hit and forget player, and I'm going to keep him for the better part of the till I play my wild card in case Sheffield don't play as defensively as they did in the past season. So I think Ramsdale for me is obviously at 5 million, he's not that 4.5 player that people are looking for. But I personally don't want any rotation in my team because I don't want to spend time thinking on which keeper to play. And when you pick a certain keeper, he doesn't keep a clean sheet, and the keeper on your bench ends up keeping a clean sheet. I don't think it really helps you all that much. So that is my first choice, when it comes to the goalkeeper. Look at my defense. I've obviously gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold only for attacking returns. I don't care whether Liverpool keep clean sheets or not. But I personally think that Alexander-Arnold is going to be one of the best defender, one of the top scoring defenders this season, irrespective of the fact whether Liverpool keep a lot of clean sheets or not. And then next we're looking at Vinagre again. Same reason as Sudhir previously mentioned, that obviously he's not going to be that player who's going to get you 10 odd assists or a lot of goals, but he's going to play each and every game, which is something which really appeals to most FPL fans. So I personally feel that he is going to be a very, very good value, because had he been a little more expensive, I would have been a little more cautious. But considering the fact that he's only the fact that he's only 4.5, I think he's a no-brainer. And the next player that I've gone is for Doherty. Obviously, he's moving to Spurs, so I'm not going to have a Wolves double defense because I don't trust them all that much to have a double defense in the start of the season. Obviously, there are teams during the course of the season who sometimes have a very good defense, and there are teams which are expected. So I remember the year when we expected Burnley to keep a lot of clean sheets after they had a 7th or 8th place finish. The next season they didn't really do well because they were playing in Europa. So I'm going to be a little conservative there. I have Doherty who's going to play for Spurs, and I think that Spurs have the best opening fixtures, because of which Doherty is a must have in my team. I'm not I had also contemplated on a double defense for Liverpool with Trent and Robbo, but I decided against it because of the fact that I'm not very sure that with the high line that Klopp has been trying to use, I'm not very sure that Liverpool are going to be very solid at the back. So I am a little concerned with respect to that. And both of them are attacking fullbacks. So obviously, and if they end up losing Gini Wijnaldum, they'll lose a lot of solidarity in midfield as well. He put in a great shift every time he played. So again, that is another reason I would be a little more careful with respect to that. Next, moving on to my midfield, obviously, my I mean, Aubameyang is a player that is going to be a permanent in most teams this time. I obviously think that he's going to have. I'm going to keep it for 2 weeks because I've seen a lot of Arsenal in the last few games, post lockdown, and I realized that they haven't been the most aggressive team per se. So obviously, Aubameyang is one who's going to score a lot of goals, but they play five at the back. They have a solid. They're building out of a solid back line. And attacking wise, I think Saka and Aubameyang are the only two players I'm looking at. But obviously I don't know how well he's going to do against a lesser team, because the last three games that they played last season were against Liverpool. Not the last three games; they had a Watford game in between, but they played Liverpool, Chelsea, and uh, Man City, and they beat all of them, which is tremendous in my opinion. But I personally feel that he is going to be a very good addition, and he's, I don't know if at all he doesn't do well in the first two game weeks because the fixtures get a little tougher for them. But I quite fancy Aubameyang doing better in the tougher fixtures because they're going to play a counter-attacking way. The next player that I actually swapped him for is Salah right now, and to get in, some. To spread the cash elsewhere, and I got him Son because it was a little concerning for me not having a Spurs player in my team, considering that they're going to have one of the best opening fixtures in the season. So I think Spurs are going to have a very good first five games, and I expect them to be well drilled under Mourinho. So obviously, I was contemplating between a Harry Kane or a Son, but I've seen a little bit of Son in uh, preseason, and he's been pretty solid. So I think that is the reason I would pick Son over Salah. But obviously, I'm looking at 2 weeks and a couple of weeks, and then again I'll be looking at someone else because I think there's a Chelsea Liverpool game in the second game week. So I'll be looking at Salah, Mane, and I want to pick one of them. Obviously, you can't have both of them at 12 million in your team. So I would want to have one of them in my team. That is why I picked Son, and I sort of let Salah go. So Sudhir, I thought that, because of the technical glitch, I started talking about my own team,
I'm
and
really
I
sorry.
covered
So,
the
but
defenders.
I was just going through your team. Obviously, there is a lot of overlap. You and I both have Werner. Werner again comes with fantastic credentials from Germany, but uh, the look test we probably not have it. He scored a goal yesterday. I think it was Joe who had some weird setup, and then Werner just finished it off. So obviously that's a great thing. He's hit the
No, I
ground
think
running in England.
considering that game, I won't delve too much into it. The reason I picked Werner is that I obviously want that X factor in my team, which not everyone is going to go.
True.
Because if you look at majority of the top FPL players, they're not going to go with a Werner or a
Correct.
new player very easily. A premium player, they'll go for a outsider who's say a mid-range player or a lower-range player. But I've picked Werner for a simple reason because I expect him to be competing for the Golden Boot this season,
Yeah.
considering the attack that Chelsea have. And I think that if at all he has a good start to the season, which I think he looked pretty sharp. And one more important thing that why I have both Ziyech and Werner in my team is only because of the fact that they were integrated in the squad towards the end of last season. So
True.
that is a very big factor. I know that, and even in the preseason, the 45 minutes these guys played together, they had like some promising link up, and the fact that they were still the best players on the pitch by a country mile. So I didn't see a player coming close to their level, especially in the attacking half of the game. So I do expect them to link up well. And Ziyech, I think, is a people look at him as a guy who takes a lot of shots, but his
Exactly.
biggest asset is about his chance creation. It's not
True.
about how many goals he scores. If you look at him in the past 5 seasons, he's got more than 10 assists every season. And for someone who's only 8 million, I think that is great value. I think that
Absolutely. So I also had Ziyech in my team. It's just that as soon as he got injured yesterday and it was flagged as a injury concern, I was like, I took him out for a Mason Mount. I think the idea is as soon as so I essentially want to buy in the Chelsea attack. That's my main, objective. So I have
Mhm.
Mount just as a placeholder because I couldn't think of anyone else. And also I think because Mount is on a lot of set pieces for your for Chelsea, so maybe that's a factor as well.
Ziyech will take some of him. That is again a problem.
Absolutely. So I think as soon as Ziyech comes back and he's fit, I think I swap him out for Mount. That's probably my main idea.
The reason
Werner, like
I'm also contemplating coming to this point because considering the fact that Ziyech, but it was a very slight knock. It doesn't seem, because I was watching the
true,
entire game,
true,
so I
true, true,
don't
true,
think it's a very serious injury. It's more of a
true,
precaution. And there are
true,
2 weeks for before the season starts. So I
true,
don't think that Ziyech
true.
is going to be a doubt for it. So obviously Ziyech is someone I really liked watching him play, and he puts in. I think he's very similar to KDB in terms of chance creation and the way he
True,
creates his
true, true,
chances.
true.
From the right hand side, he puts in those
Crosses,
crosses
those
which are,
lovely crosses. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and he even scores of them, sometimes. So yeah, so Ziyech is someone I would rather have. If given an option between the two, I would rather have Ziyech than a Werner, because there are other options in the forward line, like a Harry Kane, who I expect to do very well this season, who are at the same price point. But I look at the 8 million range, and I don't see another player. It's all about value. If you look at
True.
FPL, it's about value. I don't see more value than in an 8 million player at this point of time. Obviously, it could all go haywire. He could have an injury or have terrible form, but I highly doubt a player as good as him
Yes.
would struggle.
So I think Ziyech starts for my team as well, and he's. I really hope he does well. He was fantastic for Ajax. I think sadly he was very vocal about his appreciation for Arsenal, but we sort of missed the beat. But I think he's even when you look at the style of his play again, the eye test which comes in, I think he will do a fantastic job in England. Looks like he won't take a lot of time to adapt to the league. And like you said, he's already had a bit of a preseason because he's been here for a while now. So
Yeah,
yeah, Ziyech, I think both of us are like, yeah, really good to go on that. So yeah, that's it.
fair enough.
Sun, I think,
So
is an overlap between your team and mine as well. I think this is classic second season Mourinho, 1.5 season Mourinho, I'm guessing. So
it's
apart
just
from
half
Sun,
season.
yeah, but apart from Sun and I think Harry Kane, they don't really have a lot of attacking assets. Ericsson's gone. Lo Celso, I'm not really sure what is happening there. Sun is again very fluent in the style of play that England and the Premier League demands. He's priced at a fairly decent price, 9 if
Yeah,
I'm not wrong. So
correct.
the other thing is Spurs have a very great fixture list for the first, I think, 10 games
That is the
easily.
primary reason.
Exactly. So I sort of wanted to buy in them, and I'm assuming what they're going to do is they're going to have a fairly defensive setup, and they work. Now, again, ironically, you have Matt Doherty who's been transferred to Spurs. So I'm assuming he does add a lot of value as a Spurs player as well. A defensive Mourinho team with Doherty's attacking potential is huge. I mean, very lucrative. But yes, between Sun and Kane, I think there will be at least a couple of goals couple of goals or 2 or 3 goals that they're going to, it's going to go through them. Anything that happens at Spurs is going to be via one of these two people. I
Absolutely.
think,
And
and
honestly, I saw a lot of improvement in the Spurs game
towards the
after
end,
that
yeah,
draw against Bournemouth.
yep,
Specifically after that, I saw that Kane started playing in his normal position rather than a defensive midfielder, which is a big asset because he played as a DM for most of the last game. And also, one thing that I haven't mentioned so far is the fact that I do have 2.5 million in the bank right now. So
oh
I
yep,
would be looking at upgrading either I'll also be open to playing four at the back in the start of the season, considering that I have three premium defenders, because you know I do think there's a lot of value if you buy a wing back or a full back in this season. So I could either go from Ings to a Harry Kane. That could be one option for me, because I would still have point 0.5 left in the bank, which I could upgrade elsewhere. And I could also say go upgrade a Saint Maximin, but when I look at it, he's at 5.5. If I spend that 2.5 on him, I get close to that 8 million mark, and I don't see too much value in that price range as well. So I'm just looking where to spend that money, because that's the money that I saved after getting Salah out of my team. So it's
So
going to be
I've also done the same thing for Sun in that if Sun sort of flops for whatever reason, he can be swapped out for a Man United or a Man City asset very quickly
correct.
because they're in that price bracket as well. Also, I'm really sorry that we couldn't get to talk about United and City before I sort of had a crash in my system. They have caused a lot of problems because they're both blanking in game week 1. But United also, like Spurs, have a fantastic initial schedule. for the first 10 game weeks, I think apart from a couple of difficult games, I think United have like a really good run of fixtures. So wanting to have United assets in your team is important. So I think one of Aubameyang, Ziyech, Son, or one of these heavy hitters, even Werner for that matter, they can be swapped out for say a Rashford or a Greenwood or a Martial very quickly. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Greenwood
that's
again is
it.
listed as a midfielder, so he's one player. I need to wait and see what United do in the transfer market. That is why I don't have him. I he's going to be great value if he starts at 7.5 and they don't buy a Jadon Sancho, because if they buy a Johnny Van de Beek, Donny Van de Beek, I don't think he's going to play in that front line. He's going to play
As
somewhere
a center
between the
midfielder.
lines. So I do think that if we have a United team which has Greenwood starting week in week out and no Jadon Sancho, I think that he's a no-brainer. 7.5 Mason Greenwood is a must-have
Especially as a forward, so as a
as a
midfielder. So
midfielder.
again, he's had a positional change as well, which is very odd. But I still think the whole FPL community agrees that seven seven that range for Greenwood is a fantastic bracket. And it's that sort of a very sweet spot where you either take the risk or you ignore him completely. There's no gray area. So yeah,
Mhm.
when I think gradually I will definitely maybe if Saka does not perform, then I think I'll easily be able to switch out to say a Greenwood with minimal transfer differences, without having to take too many negative hits. So yeah, that's the idea
Yeah.
for me.
And again, if United don't really sign an attacker and a front three back, if they sign a lesser player like a Douglas Costa, I would still fancy a
Oh
Greenwood to
yeah,
start.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So that makes sense. And then I have Susek, who's again an aerial threat, 5 million, nothing to lose, and he's more of a no nonsense guy.
So
And I have same
I think Susek, Vinagre, these players are the sort of players a
enabler.
lot of teams know about them. You've seen them, but it's like all right, but then statistically they hold a lot of promise and they offer a lot of promise. Suchek is supposed to be essentially a defensive midfielder, but I think he had a lot. I think he was second or third for most touches in the penalty box by a West Ham player. So statistically, Suchek makes a lot of sense. He's a starter as well. But I think one small factor is West Ham have a terrible lineup of fixtures in the first 10 games.
Yeah.
So either he gives you a fantastic differential value, or maybe he wastes a spot on your team. It's one of those near misses. If it
No,
pays off,
actually,
you
anyways, I'm not expecting more than
dependent on points. Exactly,
2 points a
dependent on his
game
points.
from him. That is, he's just
True,
making up the numbers, because obviously it's not
true.
possible to have all good players in your starting lineup. So I do expect stuff from a Vinagre or a Doherty. I have Peters on my bench. So if you actually take a look at my bench, I've got Ryan Brewster, who I think could get a loan deal. I've got
So if he
Douglas.
gets a loan deal, I think that will be fantastic. A 4.5 forward
Yeah,
who gets minutes and seems to be a good
correct.
player.
He's
I
a
think, yeah,
terrific player, Apart from that penalty miss, if we actually look at him, he scored 3 preseason goals for Liverpool as well. So I would fancy him to stay as well. I won't be totally opposed to the fact that he may not eventually stay at Liverpool. But I have him in my team only because in my initial
4.5.
draft, I'll obviously assess it if a loan deal is finalized or not, depending on that. But yeah, he's good value, 4.5, and obviously I'm not going to start him either way. Douglas again is a 4 million defender who I have because I have
Bench
Peters
fodder, yeah.
covered. So if I do sort of go to a premium defender, which I'm also considering, because you know I this year I don't want to focus too much on which position the player is playing in. I'm only going to
So
focus on.
Ramsdale, I noticed, is a fairly interesting buy. He was decent in a relegated Bournemouth team, no doubt. But
I won't
yeah, I mean,
have him in my team if he wasn't playing for Sheffield. My only reason for getting Ramsdale is because he's going to play in a very defensive Sheffield game.
so
And if in the first few games of the season Sheffield don't defend too well, I'm going to ship him out in my wild card. It's going to be because I don't like rotating keepers. Even if I
true,
had a
true, true, true.
4.5 keeper, I wouldn't want someone, But I think that Henderson did get so many points last season because of the defense. Obviously, he's a
So I
good.
think that's an interesting conversation. Did Sheffield get clean sheets because of Henderson, or was the system what benefited Henderson, the defensive system which benefited Henderson? So yes, that's a good discussion. I think, but to be honest, I think it is visible in that apart from Egan, I don't think any Sheffield defenders have a lot of ownership. I think it's all barely single digit percentages. But yeah, I mean that it could either be a differential or yeah, I mean it could just you just have to swap out in a wild card or something. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean
because
good
when
idea.
I look at the number of saves he's made 97 saves
True,
last season,
true, true, true.
which is a decent number. But we had like a Nick Pope who had 120 odd saves, and that is why he was
Correct,
on
correct,
top.
correct.
And in spite of that, there was only a 10-point difference between the two, in spite of making those additional 23 saves. So I think that Sheffield were very good when it came to clean sheets. So
True,
that
true.
is one reason I would want to have a Sheffield, and I don't,
Asset,
I
defensive asset.
we saw Nick Pope making a lot of uh, brilliant saves throughout the season, but we didn't see. I mean, I don't remember a lot of Henderson saves which were out of the world. They were like routine or above average saves. I didn't really, watch Henderson saving an absolute worldie or something like that. So that is what my understanding is, and they've got. I mean, I don't really not only look at the midfield, but I also the defense, but I also look at the midfield where they have like a couple of players who are going to put in a lot of tackles, and they're going to provide a lot of defensive cover to the team. So that's why I think that I wouldn't want to go anywhere near a Sheffield defender apart from Egan, because he did give me two goals towards the end of last season, and he's good in the air. He missed a lot
True,
of chances in the initial
true.
part of the season, and because their right centre back and left centre back do end up joining attack while they're going forward. So I do think it's an interesting team, but I would rather have a goalkeeper who's gonna get save points at least, because Sheffield are gonna concede shots. Then they're
So
not.
my theory with Sheffield is
Hmm,
they had a fantastic season last year around.
hmm,
Chris Wilder remains, most of the defenders remain. They may try to be a bit more ambitious this season in the first half and may struggle. So
hmm,
I'm assuming Sheffield will have a very defensively sound second half of the season. Again, this is just a wild prediction.
hmm,
So
hmm,
the
hmm.
second half of the season, I think their fantasy assets when it comes to defenders will be brilliant because I think they'll sort of realize, we can't lose games. We need to make sure we are set. So yeah, that's my idea. I think, and also I think initially they have a couple of difficult fixtures as well. So I'm going to stay away from Sheffield
Hmm.
till they become even till probably the price for a couple of defenders falls, and then just have one in my team and just
I
protect it.
would quite fancy a lower a goalkeeper from a lower team against a bigger team, because they get
Because
a lot of
saves,
points. So,
save points.
and
Yeah,
if at all they happen to get a clean sheet, then they're going to be
it'd be
the
fantastic.
top scorer. They're going to be literally the top scorer in the team, and I don't think Sheffield are at their stage where they'll start looking to become a more attacking team, because I think that is what teams
They
do
sort of
when
know their level. Yeah,
3-4 seasons into the Premier League, when they are
true, true.
like a little when they're starting, like a Newcastle would probably look at it now, because they've been 2 seasons in the Premier League after getting relegated. Obviously, it's historically a big club, but you can't live in the
True, true,
past
true.
and look at it right now. I think that probably one more season in the Premiership, and they'll look to even replace Steve Bruce for an attacking brand of football, because they'll think that we've stabilized, we've put in our feet. And one thing which I personally think, the biggest reason why I think Sheffield are going to be a defensive team, because they actually broke their transfer fee record for a goalkeeper and not for an attacker. So
True,
had
true,
had being
true.
a little more expansive been their policy
Ambitions.
season,
Yeah.
so they would have sort of tried to, like an Aston Villa, I'm pretty sure is going to invest in a lot of attacking players. Leeds is a team which is going to invest in a lot of attacking players, and they've already bought Rodrigo, who
Rodrigo.
I think is a terrific player. So I think they are going to go that other way, and Sheffield are going to be very pragmatic, and they're going to try do more of the same. But obviously, it's not necessary they'll pull it off. So again, it's a gamble, but it's just for a few weeks, because we have a wild card which I'm looking to play I would be looking to play an early wildcard because getting, if at all, Bruno and KDB start
KDB.
fighting from the first week, from the second game week, I think that everyone will be looking to play an early wildcard, and I don't want to take too many hits this season, and it's
I,
justified
I,
to play an early wildcard.
I think I've heard a lot of managers say this in theory that one of the things I'm going to do this season is to not take as many hits I have in the past. I'm not sure how successful everybody is going to be
Yeah.
because once the season starts, they're like -4, -4, -8, -8. I think that happens. That's the fun part about FPL. But yes, I think a lot of people have realized holding on to an asset, letting them just stay throughout the season without taking too many hits. Throughout the course of the season, you end up doing correction and you get a lot of points rather than experimenting, trying to get a new asset and failing miserably and then trying to replace them again. So yes, I mean let's see how that goes. And also, I think the wild card this season has to be used before game week 16. So that's
Correct.
another
Correct.
point. So people will probably have, uh, given how fast-paced the season is, so that could also play in. And I think the first 3 or 4 game weeks are usually when you have just getting a sense of how players are, the eye test, who's suddenly discovered a new gear to their performance, who's sort of regressed. I'm sure we can talk a lot about United and City assets. Sterling, I'm really not sure what happens with him. Every single season, he ends up in the top 5, 6, 7 performers in midfield. But he's very frustrating in that you captain him one day and he just blanks and then he's out of your team. Suddenly he scored 4 goals against some weird team. So that's very frustrating. Bruno,
Is he's always in the top five. He'll give you 200 plus points.
but just not when he's in your team.
If you think Obama is a good asset, then Sterling is the same because they had 1 point separating them last season. I
True,
I
true,
I
true.
neither I didn't fancy Obama because he was he was Mares, Son, and these other players who had patches where they were doing well and phases where they weren't doing well. But I quite fancied a Salah and a De Bruyne as my premium two rather than a Sterling. So I did pick him
True,
towards the
true,
end of the
absolutely.
season and he did give me some returns. So yeah, with Sterling. So yeah, even I'm looking at 4 players who I really don't want to mess around with this season. I'm looking at obviously a keeper that once I sort of finalize my wildcard team, I'm not going to touch my keeper. Alexander Arnold is a season keeper for me, and right now I'm not very sure in midfield. The reason I want to play an early wildcard is because my wildcard team will have players that who are going to stay for the rest of the season. That is what I'm looking at. My initial phase is mostly this team is to get the maximum points in game week 1, and then when a United City team the assets come into play, I would want to have a balanced team rather than having too many players. I always go for equal coverage rather than going all out, which sometimes like last season it didn't work very well for me towards the latter half of. I mean, it started very well for the first 2 3 months, but when Liverpool went on that crazy run, it became a lot of Liverpool fans did very well last season because their team was doing well and they were bound to have 3 Liverpool players. They had both Mane and Salah in the initial part of the season where they were doing scoring most of their goals, and they
Also, I
did.
think Mane has been priced very expensively this season. So last year, I think it was possible to have a Mane and a Salah and a Ta or an Allison or some such. I think they've sort of priced Mane out. Not sure why, but it's very difficult to justify having both of them when you can have a spot for maybe a De Bruyne or maybe a Henderson, Fernandez or an or an Obama. So that's a huge, uh, I think, negative. I'm not sure why they did that. Also, I think while we're at it, City have another player. I mean, Ferran Torres, who seems to be a fantastic player. He comes in a great legacy. I mean, great, reputation. He's going to play in
Potential.
that. Yeah, and he's going to play in that David Silva role where Uh, and you'll hope because he's younger and he's sharper, he may score more goals than David Silva did or in the last season. So that could be a factor. Phil
Yeah,
Foden is another.
yeah, Phil Foden is someone I would rather pick over Ferran Torres because Ferran Torres is only 20 and he hasn't been the
True.
most prolific of goal scorers.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
He scored like 6 odd goals in 44 games across the season. So I don't think he's the most
I think
prolific.
the problem with all these city midfielders is they're fantastic assets. You just don't know whether they're going to play or not. That goes for Mahrez as well. Mahrez again last season. I'm really not sure how many games he started properly or on a run. But when you look at the end of the season charts, Mahrez was just right up there in the top 10, 15 midfielders. So it sort of boggles your mind. Mahrez, I'm assuming, comes at that weird price point as well, where you can
Hmm.
keep him in your squad irrespective of whether he starts or not, but he's going to give you goals. So that's a bit of a gamble. He's priced a bit expensively once again, 9.5. So I think people will wait and watch.
He's
But yeah,
8.5, not
oh,
9.5.
8.5. Sorry. So I mean, yeah, that's the idea. I think people will sort of wait and watch and then just dump him in the team after a point of time, irrespective of whether he starts or not. And yeah, he just won't be good captain choices. That's all.
Yeah, he's good in patches, so he can have like 4 5 games where he's playing very
True.
well, and then there'll be it's matches where he'll have a couple of bad games and he won't start for a few games, and then he can be very frustrating. But if you actually look at like that's why I'm saying that is why I think that Ziyech has much more value, and probably if a Havertz comes in,
Consistency as well. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking at a player who's going to start say 33 games out of 38. Obviously this season is not going to be then there aren't going to be a lot of attackers who are going to start all more than 35 games. I think 30 to 33 games would be a realistic target. So if there is one player I would look at from Man City, that is KDB, and one player I would look at from Manchester United, my first preference would be Bruno Fernandes because of the excessive number of penalties that Manchester United rewarded and his efficiency. I mean, fair credit to his efficiency. He's not missed a single penalty despite taking so many since he's come, and he had a lot of penalties for Sporting as well. So yeah, I think that Bruno is
But I
even if
think
you
he's been priced a lot more than we would have wanted. 10.5 seems rather excessive for him. And yeah, 10.5 I think is a huge detriment because he becomes a premium midfielder. And at some point of time, you would like to think United's luck with penalty runs out. I'm not sure when that happens. But if it does, yeah, then Bruno becomes a liability. He did have most points per million and points per game. I think most points per game in the last season, but it was a very short period. And yeah, I think Greenwood and Martial, not Martial, Greenwood and Rashford are probably better United assets to own
I
because they
think
save money.
Greenwood, I would agree with you because Greenwood, because of his price, is a bargain. I'm not very sure about Rashford because he can be very inconsistent. I think
Frustrating, absolutely, absolutely.
Greenwood is a very safe option which you could have, but again, if Bruno is
What are your thoughts on Martial's being shifted as a forward and the price point that he's at?
see again Marshall and Rashford, both of them they have phases. They did, if you look at the overall season, they did pretty well. So I think both of them, at least Rashford finished in the top 10. Rashford had a very good first half of the season, and
True,
Marshall was very good post lockdown. So it's either or for me. I'm not going to be one
true,
of
true,
those
true.
guys who's going to have both
Both of
Marshall.
them.
Yeah, but I think that considering the fact that if one of them has a good start to the season, I would sort of consider getting them in my team, and especially if they get a Sancho, who I'm pretty sure is going to be priced at a very as a premium asset. So I would want to have one of those rather than a Jadon Sancho because although he's English, he hasn't played a season in the Premier League, and he's got only 1.5 2 seasons of professional football at a very high level. So I would expect him to take a little longer to adjust than say a Werner or a Ziyech who've been seasoned professionals for a few seasons now. So even the same with Havertz, I would eventually probably a few 10 games down the line, I would expect Havertz to come and be the
But is
player.
is Havertz a good fantasy asset or is he just a
Oh,
solid?
Definitely.
Oh,
He's a player who's going to give you 20. He's had a record of having 20 plus goal contributions a season, which is pretty good in my opinion. And he's pretty good at chance creation. He is obviously good in the air, so he gives that aerial threat as well. He can score from both feet. So he is the youngest Bundesliga player to score more than. He's the only Bundesliga player to score more than 35 goals before the age of 20. So that is why he's getting paid the price he is. If he wouldn't have
true.
been a guy getting those goal contributions, I don't think any club would have considered paying so much for him. But he had a very average first half of the season last time out, because they started marking him and he had to figure his game out, how to sort of be the main man of the team, and where there are three players coming onto you. He scored 3 goals in the Bundesliga in the first part of the season till the winter break, and he scored 9 in the latter half, along with 4 or 5 assists in the second half of the season. So I think he's a good FPL asset once he sort of figures himself out. But I don't think he's going to adjust immediately like a Ziyech or a Werner would. So I won't expect him to do very well from the first game, but probably considering his signing has also been a little delayed, so he won't have a pre-season. He'll go directly play for Germany and come back. So he would be an option I'm looking at, and obviously KDB is my first choice. I'm looking at. I think he was the best player last season, FPL wise and otherwise as well.
And you
And
can see KDB's game, how direct he is. He's purposely looking for his teammates. He enjoys assisting the player who's just nearest to the goal. So I
correct.
think that's it just goes without saying. I think the only thing is we can hope that one of the other premium assets sort of flops, so that you can
Hmm.
just take that money and invest it in KDB right away. But yeah, I
Correct.
think KDB goes in the team right away. A
No, I
small
think this time, yeah.
hypothetical but a very possible situation is the arrival of Lionel Messi in the Man City team. And if he does, first of all, the question is, where do you get the money to sort of field him? Secondly, whether he'll cost 14 or 15, or I'm sure he's going to cost definitely more than Aubameyang and Salah. And the
Definitely.
third thing is, yeah, I think that's going to be like, who do you
One
dump
thing is
for?
considering the pattern, which considering that they're not considering they're considering inside forwards as midfielders, right?
Yeah,
So he generally plays on the right hand side for Barcelona, and Suarez plays down the center. So will he be in midfield? Because if he's in midfield, he's going to be a tremendous asset. But again, the good thing for us is we'll have our squads pretty settled, because I don't think this is going to be a deal which is going to be concluded very smoothly, considering the uproar that is sort of taking place right now. La
I mean,
Liga
they,
coming
they
out
want to go
with,
to court. They don't want to go to La Liga. Doesn't want to sell him 700 million involved.
yeah, yeah,
But he's Lionel Messi, so at least yeah, it's fantastic. Also, what are your thoughts about these other small assets who have moved around within the league, like Willian, for example? Or do you think they'll be able to contribute as well as they did last season, or do you think they're just going to
see,
be phased
the
out?
only
Like
reason
Doherty,
Willian.
for example. I'm sorry I missed that part when you were talking about your team. Does Doherty stay in your team when he becomes a Spurs asset, or
100%, because I think that Spurs are definitely looking at a centre back in this video, and they're going to sort of build defensively. They bought Højbjerg, who's going to play in that holding role. They didn't have a proper defensive midfielder in their team, and obviously Harry Winks is a good midfielder. He's good with the ball, but after Vanayama, they haven't had like a proper holding midfielder, and he himself was injured for very long period. So now that they have a base to build on, I think. And also, if you look at it, Aurier did get a lot of attacking returns. It's not that he sort of held him back or something. And similarly, I do expect Doherty to get in good returns, attacking wise as well. And I'm expecting good defensive returns, and especially in the first few fixes. So what I've seen of Mourinho is not very defensive against the lesser teams. He only goes defensive and parks the bus if he's playing a top 16. So I don't.
what?
So there's Himanshu who's a big. I think this is a paid review which is coming in from Himanshu. He says he's a huge fan of the guest tonight. So Kudos to you, Sudhir, for
All the spamming of the WhatsApp group and Facebook work. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Sudhir. Can
much.
you hear me?
And yeah, and he's Himanshu's come at when we are discussing Mourinho. So I mean, it's like bonus for Himanshu. But yes, I think I expect. So one differential from a Mourinho team, which I really want to touch upon, was Davis. I think people are not sure whether he's out of position. He could be a good asset to have in your team. He sort of plays in an advanced position. He's marked as a defender. So, his goals and his clean sheet contributions could come in handy. A lot of bonus points as well. So, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
Ben
that.
Davis is a good asset in my opinion as well. But I look at Doherty and I think that this guy is an eye for goal and he's very good. He's very efficient
When
feeding
it
the
comes to
ball
assists,
to Jimenez.
absolutely.
And Jimenez is very close to a Harry Kane. He's like an overall forward who's physical enough, who can score with his head, who can score with both feet. So I think that it's a perfect fit, and that's why they've. I think it's a bargain. The actual price that they paid for Doherty is an absolute steal, considering that Chelsea paid 50 million for Ben Chilwell. Obviously, he's almost 30, so you have to consider the fact that players who are a little older, like Chelsea got Ziyech for 34 million only because he was 27. Had he been 23, he would have gone close to 70, 80 million. So I do understand where you're coming from and why Doherty would be a little
How
dicey. But
does Chilwell? Do you think you'll ever get Chilwell in your fantasy team? Because he's
no,
fantastic when it comes to his attacking assets as well.
I think he's good as an attacking fullback, but he's not very good with his returns. He doesn't have a lot of attacking returns. If you look at his goals and assists last season and the season before that, I don't think that Ben Chilwell is a player that I will probably be looking at this season because I wouldn't I didn't look at him when he was at Leicester as well, only because of the fact that he doesn't get that attacking return. He's very good going forward. He's very athletic and probably in a Chelsea team he could get in those goals and assists, but he got like 3 goals, 3 assists last season, which for 5.5 is not something. I would rather play an extra point 0.5 for say 10 attacking returns because that gives me more value, and that is what I'm looking at. And again, I don't think Chilwell is an asset I'll be looking at unless he really transforms his game under this new setup. Because I've heard a lot of Leicester podcasts and they've talked that they've spoken about the fact that Brendan Rodgers tends to underuse his fullbacks. There is
True,
much more
true, true, true.
potential, attacking potential in a Pereira and a Chilwell. Pereira obviously is someone I would fancy over the likes of Ben Chilwell because I think he's the best right back in the Premier League in my opinion. Not fantasy wise, but as an overall player, I think he's got a good balance between his offensive and defensive play. Unlike Alexander Arnold, who is the best attacking fullback probably in the
Period.
world. Yeah, I mean, next to Kimmich, if you look at him, because Kimmich scores a lot of goals as well. So these are the two fullbacks that I would pick. But if you look at the overall, a better fullback, I think Ricardo Pereira is one for me who's good attacking. So Ben Chilwell is not someone I'm looking at. Thiago Silva, if he's priced right, would be someone. If Chelsea manages to tighten the defense, I would probably pick a Zuma or a Thiago. But again, I'm not looking at Chelsea defenders
Oh,
considering
Thiago
that.
Silva. I got confused for a minute. I thought you were talking about Thiago. And I was like, if
Oh
he
no,
comes,
Thiago
I mean,
Alcantara is not a good FPL asset. He's one of the best midfielders right now that we have in the game. He's one of the
no, but
last old
so again,
school.
my personal opinion is I really think if he comes to England, I think Thiago will be a fantastic FPL asset as well because Liverpool don't really have a. So Liverpool have a very odd system which was actually exposed yesterday in that all their creativity comes from Salah, Mane, Ta, and Robertson sort of overlapping with each other, and then maybe like a one half decent ball by Firmino somewhere in the middle. They score a lot of goals, but there's a lot of predictable patterns to how they score goals. Whereas Thiago will just come in and unlock them in an entirely different style altogether. So
No,
yeah,
but I don't think Thiago has that attacking return. He would probably be good.
perhaps,
If
yep.
he gets one return, he'll be up for 3 bonus points. He's that kind of a player. But
True, true, true.
I don't think he's going to be that. that of a game changer, that big a game changer. He would obviously help the attacking assets a little more. He could probably benefit a Salah, Mane, or even a Firmino for that matter. And the problem, what I personally feel, that while Liverpool, I don't think are going to start off very well, because Mane and Salah have struggled ever since the lockdown.
Absolutely.
The start began. So Salah has missed a lot of chances, and
Absolutely.
I think there has been a loss in fitness for them. Especially Salah. I think he's not as fit as he used to be, and I don't know. I personally, that's again a hunch. Obviously, it
He
comes
does
out
seem a
of.
bit rusty, especially from the restart. I'm not sure how, but I think
No, because
Salah
I
is
watched
probably
the
one of
game
those players
against
who's
Salzburg as well. I watched the game against again, not getting too much out of friendlies, but you see a player and you see how sharp he is. He doesn't look too sharp this season. So if at all I'm going to get a Liverpool attacker out of the two, I would fancy Mane more than Salah. But then all of that could change once he gets a couple of goals going for him there, because he's again a momentum kind of a player, like a
absolutely.
Bruno Fernandes. If he gets going, he gets going. So yeah, I think that's it. Let's just finish your team as well, because I
Sure.
think we've covered enough of mine, and we've gone over an hour. But that's all right. Let's just, now that we've already gone above an hour, we'll might as well finish the entire thing. So uh, obviously, now looking at your team, we are going to just discuss the attacking part of it. Obviously, you discussed about Aubameyang, Son, and Mount. Again, you explained why he is in your team only because Ziyech is injured. And now looking at Saka, okay, so Saka is someone I don't know much about. I don't fancy him as an FPL asset. I think he could be one once he
So
gets a.
Saka had, I think, over 13, 14 assists all throughout all competitions last season, the league, Europa, and all the cup competitions combined. So that's a huge factor.
Hmm.
Second is, I think, again, he's very, very, very economical. He's just 5.5. So he's one of those players who you can keep as bench fodder, rotation, or just randomly dump him in a home game, and you can hope for great returns from him. Again, this is probably sentimental, but he's been handed the number 7 jersey this season. And with the absence of Ozil, with the absence of Ceballos as of till this point of time, apart from Aubameyang, we don't really have a creative player who can feed into Oba
Prithvi,
and Pepe.
sorry to cut you off. One very important question that I need to ask you about Saka, because it would help a lot of people who end up watching this, is what position is he most likely to play? Because we've seen a lot of positional shifts with him. He's played as a wing back. He's played. Where do you expect him starting on a week on week basis?
So he's a winger for sure. I think the left wing back experiment was just to sort of blood him in the team. You
Mhm.
have Pepe on one side and Saka on the other. That's the idea.
All
But
right.
I think Saka, because we don't have a pure number 10, and Arsenal usually has a pure number 10, Saka
Correct.
will probably drift into those areas as a creator. Whether he
Mhm.
succeeds or not could be a completely different issue altogether. But I
Yeah.
think he'll drift in centrally. And
And
Ainsley Maitland-Niles, these guys have fantastic chemistry with Aubameyang.
correct.
So I think that will also play in. And at 5.5, I think he's a good asset to sort of take a punt on. That's where I am. That's all.
So he
If
and who do you think he will compete for a starting berth with? I mean, that is again a very important factor when you're considering a player like him.
So I think again, because we don't have a Ceballos at the moment in the team, and we have spots in midfield, Saka starts. When it comes to the system that Arsenal has, we've had a three at the back, 3-5-2 or 3-5-3 sort of a system. So Saka's presence in the team is sort of guaranteed. Again, with the number jersey and his performance over the past few months. But like I said, because of Arsenal's fairly fluid system, I won't be surprised if Saka is right up there beyond Aubameyang as the only other guy, whereas everybody is sort of trying to push the ball to their feet. So Saka and of course Lacazette's potential sale or his stay at the club could have a factor. But I think Saka, Pepe, Aubameyang, and Lacazette are probably some of the most advanced assets that Arsenal advanced players that Arsenal will have. And I think Saka is just the most economical in that group. So he's just worth taking a punt on. That's about it. There's no deep
No,
analysis.
I would be much more keen on Saka if Willian hadn't joined the club, but I think that Willian is going to take minutes off him because if you consider Saka as a player who's going to play in the front
True,
three,
true, true, true.
I would eventually expect because Willian is someone who's very good when he's fighting for a spot, but once he gets it, he becomes very complacent. So he and a Pepe obviously has had his ups and downs.
True.
We haven't seen the best of him yet, and I think that. Obviously, when Arsenal actually bought him, I was terrified of him doing really well, but things haven't gone his way, to
True,
be
true,
very
true.
honest. There have
So
been a lot of
one of
stoppages.
my early drafts actually had Pepe instead of Saka as the third Arsenal asset. Again, not because of sentimental reasons, but because Pepe sort of found his ground after the restart. He was probably man of the match in the FA Cup final as well. He was really good. He almost had a goal which was ruled out. So
I
what
think
I believe is
Aubameyang brings that, but yeah, he was the second best player in my opinion.
exactly. So
He was
my and also when you look at his French performances, it was his second season at in France where he sort of came alive. So I'm assuming, in that category of players between Ziyech, Mount, Son, Pepe, if everything goes well, I would obviously for multiple reasons want Pepe to be performing at a very high level. But
Mhm.
this could be a hot take, which we usually do when you and I are on the show along with Queen sometimes. But I won't be surprised if Pepe's goal involvements this season are near the 20 goal mark. Goals and assists combined near 20. And if that's the case, he becomes a fantastic FPL asset, in my opinion.
Yeah, correct. I wouldn't go against it as well, but I still am not very convinced in him because he even during his good spell he did have a couple of bad games, and then he can have a very good game and not he had like a very good game but didn't add too many returns in them. So
True, true,
I think that he's a dicey asset, but yeah, if at all he finds his feet, and obviously the reason with Lille is a little different because he was very young when he joined Lille, and obviously he didn't have that potency in terms of the attacking talent. But I think that even if he gets 15 attacking returns, you're talking about 20. If he gets somewhere between 15 to 20, I think he'll be a solid asset for the price because, and obviously, if you're talking about FPL returns, there are deflected shots which also count. So he could definitely hit the 20 mark, which I think is a realistic assessment of what he could do. And
true.
but you look at players at the other end where you look at Pulisic for that matter, who I think really, uh, I mean, I would compare them in similar light because obviously they joined last season. Both of them took their time to sort of get used to it, but I think Pulisic was someone who is more likely to get inside the box. So,
And score.
yeah. Score. I mean, Pepe is a very good finisher. I think that we haven't seen the best of him. He does miss a few chances, but overall, if you look at how he was in France, I think he's a good finisher. But he's not going to get in the box for those tap-ins. He's not that kind of a player.
True.
Most of his goals are the ones which he's running with the ball and scoring them. Whereas Pulisic obviously can score those goals as well, but he's also looking at getting into the box. So I would be a little confused. And he's a little cheaper as well. Pulisic, for that matter, this season is cheaper than. No, Pepe is 8 million, so that is great
So that's
value.
the idea. So again, I think what I think is going to happen is Aubameyang is going to be the guy who's at the end of all the passes that all these players are going to perform, and you've seen
Yeah,
how they look up to him and the chemistry that they
yeah,
have.
correct,
What
correct.
I'm assuming is Pepe will have a lot of assists this season simply by virtue of the fact that he will dribble his way into the penalty box, find Aubameyang, and they have great chemistry. So I think that should translate into goals and assists. Uh, because of the way Arsenal is, I think set pieces will be given to Pepe to sort of boost his confidence, and I think he's shown that he's good at set pieces when it comes to free kicks. I'm assuming he's going to find another level to his play. So, like I said, having a third Arsenal asset seems fairly sentimental because I'm an Arsenal fan, but I think apart from Aubameyang, who's the mainstay, I think one of Saka and Pepe will definitely impress. Willian, I think, we'll have to wait and see how he does, what minutes he gets. Uh, you know, I'm very sure somewhere in the second half of the season he will come in. His experience will come in a lot, very handy. But yes, I
I
think till
feel
then
like
a punt on
Milan
Saka
will
could
be
be
good
worth
at
it,
it only if he takes penalties. If he doesn't take penalties, I think last
which he
season,
won't at Arsenal because
yeah,
Aubameyang is going to take penalties. So
he didn't miss a penalty for Chelsea in his entire career, and whenever he got the chance, he always did well. But that is the reason he's got 9 goals and his FPL stats look better.
true,
But
true, true.
I don't think he's a very good FPL asset. He's a decent player, but he
For
can be
his
very.
price 7.0, I think it's a decent price as well. We'll
Yeah,
probably have to.
I would rather go for a Greenwood, to be honest. If
True,
there's a choice
absolutely, absolutely.
in the same price bracket, I would not go for Willian as an FPL asset. I don't think he adds much
True.
to my FPL team. But yeah, last season a lot of people got him in, and he scored 4 penalties thanks to Pulisic winning most of them. So they had a good thing going on where Pulisic was winning. I think 2, 3 back-to-back penalties he won, in a few games. So I think that really helped him. But my only concern with Willian playing is he will take minutes of Saka because Pepe and
So I
Aubameyang.
think players like Saka again. Uh, it's not always a hardcore logic and numbers. I think Saka is just a punt. So even for example, I have Mitrovic
No, no,
who
for
looks like
5.5, obviously he's not someone who's
exactly,
going to occupy a lot of his budget because I
exactly.
personally am looking at getting in Saka for a same maximum. Even I am looking at it, but I want to be a little. That's why I'm asking you so many
So
questions
I
because
think
there's.
ASM will have guaranteed minutes because of Newcastle's otherwise lack of creativity and. But I think what happens with ASM is you've seen him have the ball at his feet, but he doesn't have anyone to pass to. He doesn't really have a shot in his locker to sort of score from 30 yards out. So I think that is where he sort of struggles. He is one of those players. If he was at Arsenal, for example, or if he was at say City or United,
A
he would
better
have been
club.
fantastic at a slightly higher price bracket because he can deliver the ball to someone's feet. I think he just
Hmm.
doesn't have someone to score off him at Newcastle, which is why he becomes a fancy asset, but not a lucrative one or a viable asset. That's what I think.
Correct. So let's just move on to the forward line now. We've discussed too much about Saka, just 5.5 million. So we're looking at Mitrovic, which I think is a fair buy. He starts the season
And
well.
I think
Probably
yes,
going to be a Timo Pukki. I see all
absolutely,
Timo Pukki
absolutely,
vibes coming from him. He's going to have
absolutely.
a very good start and then going to fizzle out towards the latter half of the season. Scott Parker, I'm really
And and
impressed
I
with
think
him
I
as a
think that
manager.
if that happens, it will be good for all fantasy managers as well because we'll be able to sell him off, take that point, then get a 4.5 bench fodder forward, and then use that 1.5 that
Correct.
you get from Mitrovic, invest it in either a midfielder or maybe another forward. I think that's the idea. So I think Fulham
Yeah.
have a like good run of fixtures in the first 8 games. I think that's what
Yeah.
the maximum cap is, and that's about it. I think. So
Yeah,
yeah,
then Timo Werner again. We discussed him at length. I expect
true.
him to do well, and I don't know why it's showing Liverpool. Oh, probably you clicked. You've sent in your team. So then we have Harry Kane. All right. So Harry Kane is again a very interesting option. I did pick him in the latter half of my season last year, and he did give me a lot of returns. And I think he's now that he's finally found his full fitness, because the deal with Harry Kane is when fit, he's the best striker in the Premier League. But
Absolutely.
the problem is he hasn't been fit for say 2.5 years now. If he hasn't been at full fitness,
And also penalties at Spurs, so I think they do get a fair
but
amount of
now that
penalties as well.
Mourinho is there, they're not going to get penalties. I mean, that's if you look at the track record of Mourinho teams getting penalties right from the time, even when we won it, when we had Diego Costa and Fabregas, he's got a and when he went to United, United stopped getting penalties. Now that he's gone to Spurs, Spurs will stop getting penalties. So you can VAR or no VAR, I think penalties is not going to be something which Spurs are going to get. And if at all they get penalties, Kane is going to score them. But
True.
apart from that, from open play, I think he's still one of he's the top two strikers in my opinion. If you
True.
look at the top three strikers in the Premier League, I think Aguero, Kane, and Aubameyang are the ones which I would look at, and then
True.
there'll be close calls with say a Werner who's not proven this time. So let's see how he does. But these three guys are Premier League proven top scorers, and they've all sort of been in contention for the Golden Boot. And Kane has won it twice as well. So I think that Kane is a no-brainer for me,
Is
especially.
Vardy going to feature in your team? I think he's almost 33, about to be
No, I
34.
don't think that a player. I think Vardy not doing well towards the end of last season was more down to the fact that they didn't have Madison in their team, they didn't have Pereira in their team, they didn't have Chilwell for a large chunk of that. Those 5 games that they played towards the end of the game. So I think we are putting more of the blame on Vardy than the fact that the supply to him was stopped. Harvey Barnes is not clinical enough. He
Absolutely.
missed a lot of chances. He did create a few, but obviously Madison is one guy who the Madison Vardy link up was something which was the best part of
The
Leicester's
first
play
half of
first
the.
half of
So
the
I
season.
think Leicester hasn't featured in a lot of people's drafts, in initial drafts which are floating around online. I think there's a reason for it, but if Leicester are able to sort of come up with a couple of differentials, I
Yeah.
think that would be very, very exciting, because I think after a while we are going to fall into that template where almost everybody has the same 6 or 7 players.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully Leicester provide that bit of an X factor and a differential.
So if I were in your place, I would have a Madison over a Mount because I don't think Mount is someone who's going to have too many attack returns. Although he did get a lot of attacking returns, but Chelsea are most likely going to play a 4-2-3-1 this time. So there is a chance that he'll play a lot of games in that double pivot. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek, if he sort of gets the injury hangover off his back, he's going to play as a backup to Kai Havertz in the number 10 spot. Or probably in the initial part of the season, we could probably have Mount playing in that number 10 role. And once Havertz sort of settles in, we're going to see Pulisic on the left, Havertz behind Werner, and then Ziyech on the right. So I don't think Ziyech is a player who's going to be replaced by anyone. Again, Werner is someone who's
Agreed.
irreplaceable. Havertz is someone who I think will take a few games. And again, on the left hand side, I think Pulisic is going to be the number one play. He will share a few minutes with Callum Hudson-Odoi, but obviously Pulisic unlocked a different level last season, which I hadn't seen him in Dortmund as well because he didn't have a lot of end product, but he did put in a lot of assists as well, got himself a few goals. So I think once he's fit, he would be an option. He would be a third Chelsea option that I would consider even over Havertz because he's played a season and he's done his bit in the limited amount of games he's played. He scored a perfect hat trick as well against Burnley, which is something which shows that on his day he could give you
Cool.
that big ball. So yeah, I think that's about it. We've gone almost for an hour and a half, Sudhir. It's been I think one of the longest videos which we've done in a long time. But I think we enjoyed it. That's why we kept on going. And
Also, I think fantasy is just one of those things you can keep talking for hours and hours and hours. I'm very sure 2 weeks from now, a few days before the games actually start, you and I could have drastically different teams.
correct,
If the Messi thing goes through, if Havertz is confirmed, if Sancho is confirmed, if Aouar comes at Arsenal, or maybe I mean uh, Ainsley Maitland-Niles goes to Wolves, for example, he could become a very good asset
correct,
as well. What if Martinez goes out of Arsenal? Then it becomes a different thing. So I think that's the fun part with FPL. Hopefully, we'll be smarter, wiser, more efficient this year than we have in the past.
yeah,
Lesser,
making lesser hits.
yeah, lesser hits, lesser knee-jerk reactions, lesser bandwagoning. And but who are we kidding? We love that part about FPL. Oh, he's playing very well. 82nd minute, let's just transfer in, and then in the 86th minute, someone gets injured. You're like, damn it, I just wasted -4 on this guy. But yes, I
Correct.
think that's the fun part. So yeah, let's
All
see.
right,
Let's see how that
guys.
goes.
Thank you so much, Sudhir, for joining me. We had a lovely time talking about FPL and a lot of other stuff as well, which we sort of quietly put into the mix. And guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like the video, please click on the like button and please subscribe to the Sports Box. We'll be back with, a few other FPL episodes again, and we're going to talk about a lot of other stuff with respect to FPL, because there are going to be a lot of transfers. So we're only talking about the first draft now. We're not talking about the final team. We'll probably try to do a season, to an episode just before the season begins, so that we can put in perspective the actual teams we have and why we made the changes we had. We can probably do a comparison as well. So that's going to be really interesting. So let's just sign out, Rao. I'm pretty sure everyone is sleeping right now. It's 1 o'clock in India. So let's just sign off. Thank you so much, Sudhir. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And let's do one more again, in the next couple of weeks.
Sure thing, Prithvi. Thank you very much. And all the very best for the sports box.
Sure. Thank you.